When I first saw Jamie standing in our doorway, suitcase in hand, tousled hair and an eager smile across his face, I felt something tighten in my chest, and it wasn't just the usual discomfort of having a stranger in your space. He looked too comfortable, too placed. Natalie beamed beside me, her hand brushing my back as if to reassure me this was all a great idea. Just 3 months, she had said, and he'll be no trouble. We'll hardly notice he's here. But Jamie wasn't invisible. From the start, he had a presence that filled space. He greeted our son like they already knew each other. He complimented the smell of dinner, the color of our hallway walls, even the firmness of our couch cushions. I tried to suppress my reaction. Maybe it was just cultural. Maybe he was taught to be overly polite, overly grateful. But I couldn't shake the feeling that Natalie had invested more into this arrangement than she let on. She had handled all the communication with the exchange program, organized the room herself, even bought him new towels, so he'd feel welcome. The room, by the way, was our guest room, my former office. She'd cleared it out without asking. I thought you didn't like people sleeping above the garage, I said that evening as we were cleaning up after dinner. Natalie glanced up. For you. Not for someone who's 19 and doesn't wake up from a truck horn. Besides, I wanted him to have some privacy. He's a guest, I replied, carefully. Not a family member. She tilted her head. Don't be stiff, Matt. It's just 3 months. Jamie fit himself into our daily life like a puzzle piece we didn't know was missing. He helped clean the kitchen, played chess with Eli, took the garbage out before I had the chance. Every move felt rehearsed, practiced, just enough to be impressive, never enough to be suspicious. On the third night, I returned home a bit earlier than usual. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed our living room blinds were half closed. The glow inside was dim. I wasn't trying to sneak, but something about the silence made me cautious. I walked in. Jamie was in the kitchen, shirtless, casually rinsing a mug. Natalie's laugh floated in from the hallway. When she appeared, her hair was still wet, tied into a messy bun. She was wearing an oversized hoodie I didn't recognize, not mine. Hey, she said, startled for just a fraction of a second. You're home early. Got lucky with traffic, I replied. I looked at Jamie. Everything okay here? He smiled. Yeah, we just finished cleaning up. Eli's already upstairs. We were watching that baking show with him. Natalie nodded too quickly. You hungry? I said no, even though I hadn't eaten. I watched Jamie walk past me, towel over his shoulder, the kind they keep in the guest bathroom. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Something didn't fit. Not yet enough to accuse, but enough to observe. The next morning, as I took the trash out, Mrs. Dinslow, our elderly neighbor, waved to me from across the yard. You've got a busy house these days, she said, smiling. He's a handsome one, that Jamie. So polite. I saw him and Natalie walking together last night. Looked like siblings, almost. I forced a smile. Yeah, just part of the program. She nodded. Well, you're lucky to have such open energy in the house. I don't think I've seen Natalie laugh that freely in years. I carried the bin to the curb, not looking back. She was right. I hadn't seen Natalie laugh like that in years, either. Jamie didn't just settle into the house. He absorbed it. Like air. Like steam rising into corners you didn't know could hold warmth. By the end of the first week, he had a rhythm, one that synced with Natalie's in ways I hadn't expected. He woke when she did. Drank his coffee the way she drank hers, black, but with a tiny pinch of cinnamon she used to say was her thing. He started folding Eli's laundry without being asked, calling it just being helpful, and Natalie praised him for it like he was a miracle worker. One morning, I walked into the kitchen and found him wearing my robe. Not similar to mine, my actual robe. He turned and grinned. Oh man, sorry, I thought this was one of the guest ones. It was just hanging there. It's fine, I said slowly. Just try not to mix things up. That one's personal. He nodded, still smiling, and poured himself coffee from the pot I had just made. You always make it strong, huh? He said, taking a sip. Natalie came in behind him, playfully nudging his shoulder. He's got a very grown-up palate. You'd be surprised. They both laughed. I didn't. Later that day, I went into Jamie's room to look for a wrench I thought I left during the office conversion. He wasn't home, and I didn't plan to snoop. But when I opened his closet, I noticed something strange. A pair of my old sneakers. A hoodie that looked identical to the one Natalie wore that night I came home early. On his nightstand, a dog-eared copy of Natalie's favorite novel. The one she said never left her nightstand. I touched nothing. Just stood there for a few seconds, listening to the sound of the house breathing around me. When Jamie came back that evening, I was sitting on the porch with a beer, acting casual. He joined me after a while, stretching his arms like he'd just come from a long, productive day. "You settling in okay?" I asked, staring at the trees across the street. "Yeah," he said. "Honestly, feels more like home than back home." I turned my head. "That comfortable already?" He looked at me, then gave a small shrug. "You ever feel like some places just get you? Like you were meant to find them?" "Sure," I said carefully. "Usually takes longer than a week, though." He laughed. "Guess I'm quick to connect. Your wife's been amazing about helping me adapt." I said nothing for a beat too long. He added, "You've got a good thing here. Strong family. Stable." Then, almost absently, "You're a lucky man." He meant it as a compliment, but it landed like a warning. That night, Natalie and Jamie cleaned up together in the kitchen, chatting about grocery lists, weekend plans, some films she wanted to show him. I stood in the hallway, listening, unnoticed. He knew our routines. He knew her rhythms. And I was starting to wonder if he knew his place in the house better than I knew mine. It was Saturday morning, and the house smelled like waffles and syrup, the kind of scent that tried too hard to remind you everything was normal. Natalie had taken Jamie to the farmer's market, just to show him the local scene, she said. I stayed behind with Eli, planning to get some quiet time together. Something grounding. We built a Lego spaceship on the living room rug. Eli was focused, tongue sticking out slightly the way it always did when he concentrated. His small hands were methodical, sorting blue from gray, symmetrical pieces from wild ones. "You're getting fast," I said. "I watched Jamie do it last time," he replied. "He's really good." "Yeah? You two hang out a lot." Eli nodded. "He's nice. He tells funny stories. And Mom laughs more when he's here." That last part stung. Not because it wasn't true. I noticed it too, but because of how easily my son said it, like it was just another fact, like the sky being blue. I didn't push. I kept building. A few minutes passed in silence before Eli added, completely unprompted, "Sometimes they lay on the couch under the blanket and laugh at the same time." I turned my head. "Who?" "Mom and Jamie," he said simply. "Like yesterday, after you left. They watched the baking show again, I think. She told me not to bother them and gave me your phone to play." My stomach tightened. "She gave you my phone?" "Yeah. She said not to tell you, 'cause it's your work phone and you don't like games on it." He said it without malice, without understanding what he'd just handed me. I forced a smile. "That's okay, buddy. You didn't do anything wrong." He looked up. "Is Mom mad?" "No. Why would she be?" He shrugged. "She just said not to tell you. That's all." I sat back, my spine rigid against the couch, suddenly too aware of every sound in the house, every quiet echo. Eli kept building. Later that evening, Natalie returned with bags of produce and a bright, almost glowing mood. Jamie trailed behind her, carrying the heavier boxes, laughing about how overpriced the kale was. I watched them unload. Their movements synced again, like a couple long used to kitchen routines. After dinner, when Eli went to bed and Jamie retreated to his room, I brought it up. "Eli told me something today." Natalie glanced up from rinsing dishes. "Yeah. Said you and Jamie were under the blanket together yesterday, watching shows." She laughed, sharp and dismissive. "Kids exaggerate." "He said you told him not to tell me." She froze, just a second, then turned off the faucet. "Matt," she began, drying her hands carefully, "he's 5. He makes things up all the time. You know that. I let him play on your phone because he was restless, and Jamie and I were on opposite ends of the couch." "That's not what he said." She sighed. "Are you really going to let a 5-year-old's imagination start a fight?" "I'm not fighting." "Then what are you doing?" "I'm noticing." That hung in the air between us, heavier than it sounded. She softened. "He probably saw a moment out of context. It meant nothing." I wanted to believe that. Part of me still did. But something had shifted. Not just in what Eli said, but in how she reacted. The precision in her defense. The way she folded the towel a little too evenly. That night, I lay in bed, listening to the hum of Jamie's music 2 rooms over. Not loud, just enough to remind me he was still here. Still in this house. Still close to the woman I married. Eli's voice echoed in my mind. "Mom said not to tell you." Trust doesn't usually break like glass. It erodes, one grain at a time, until the shape beneath it stops looking familiar. I wasn't sure what I was standing on anymore, but I knew it wasn't solid. It started with a notification I almost ignored. A charge on our joint card, $112 at a running store uptown. I hadn't bought anything in weeks. I barely even ran anymore. At first, I assumed it was a mistake. Natalie occasionally used the card when hers was low. No big deal. But then I opened the app. There were more charges, not big enough to trigger alerts, but clustered in a pattern. Athletic wear, protein bars, a men's boutique spa, a new subscription to an upscale gym I didn't recognize. One of the entries was for a pair of custom-fitted running shoes. Under the name Jamie. The billing address was ours. I stared at the screen. I didn't feel rage. I felt dissonance, that quiet, hollow kind that makes the world suddenly unfamiliar. That night, while Natalie folded laundry, I sat across from her at the dining table and asked, "Did you buy Jamie those shoes?" She looked up, surprised, but only briefly. "Yeah, he's been jogging every morning. His soles were worn down. I thought it would be a nice gesture." He didn't ask. "You used our joint account?" She blinked. "Well, yes, but it was just easier. I meant to transfer the amount back. I thought it would be fine." I nodded slowly. "And the spa?" She paused, then smiled. "That was a welcome gift. Kind of a silly tradition I have. You remember when we hosted Anna from Germany? I sent her to the nail salon the first week. You didn't charge Anna's visit to my name. That was years ago, Matt. I let it go, outwardly. But inside, something rearranged. I started paying attention to the grocery list. Jamie's preferred brand of yogurt suddenly stocked in bulk. A new hair product in the bathroom, not Natalie's, not mine. His favorite protein bars on the kitchen shelf. I began noticing routines, too. Jamie jogging in the mornings, leaving and returning at the same time as Natalie's coffee walks. The way she laughed harder when he spoke than she ever did with me, even when we were still okay. The sound of them talking at night in the living room, just low enough to make me strain to listen. And yet, whenever I entered the room, the air shifted. A quick pause. A polite silence. Too polite. The next day I called the gym. I asked, under the pretense of verifying charges, if Jamie's account could be confirmed under my name. The receptionist cheerfully explained it had been registered as a family add-on. Same last name. Assumed relation. When I hung up, I didn't say anything to Natalie. What would I say? That she had quietly started building a parallel life, piece by piece, inside the infrastructure of our existing one? That our accounts, our pantry, our space had all been rebalanced without my knowing? No, I wasn't ready to confront. Not yet. But I started my own record. A folder on my private drive. Screenshots. Notes. Dates. My own audit. She wasn't going to tell me the truth. So I was going to collect it. One line at a time. I started sleeping in the guest room under the pretense of back pain. Natalie didn't question it. She offered a smile. A quick, "I hope you rest better," and continued brushing her hair, as if we were two roommates with aligned routines and separate lives. The guest room shared a wall with Jamie's. At night, I could hear muffled footsteps, low conversation, the sound of drawers opening, closing, his voice, too familiar to be temporary. The strangest part wasn't how quiet everything had become. It was how coordinated. They moved through the house like people rehearsing. Always 3 seconds ahead of my entrance. Always one phrase, short of suspicion. She still cooked for me. Still left folded shirts on the bed. But her eyes never settled on mine long enough to connect. It was like living with two versions of her, one domestic, polite, and present. The other, detached, observant, already halfway gone. I started working later, spending hours at cafes just to be alone with my own thoughts. I took calls in the car instead of the office. I found a small corner table in a library no one visited, my own observation post. I wasn't retreating. I was repositioning. I stopped asking questions. That was key. The less I asked, the more relaxed they became. The more confident. And in that confidence, they began to slip. One night, I came home late on purpose. I parked a block away, walked quietly through the yard, and sat on the back steps just outside the kitchen window. The light was on. Their voices inside, soft, not romantic, but close. Fluid. I didn't mean to listen. But when you stop being part of the conversation, you start hearing everything. Natalie, he's still distant. Jamie, do you think he knows? Natalie, I don't know. He doesn't ask. He's quiet. Jamie, maybe that's worse. A pause. I could hear a drawer slide. Natalie again. I'm not sure how long I can do this. I keep thinking he's going to walk in and say it, like he's already figured it out, but wants me to say it first. Jamie, would that be so bad? Natalie, yes. Because then I'd have to admit what this is. Jamie didn't reply right away. Then, calmly, but you already know. There was no laughter. No music. Just the sound of something being put on the counter, maybe a glass, maybe her phone. I sat outside long after the lights went off, the house swallowed in shadows. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. But I felt an odd stillness wrap around me, not like peace. More like clarity. They weren't unsure anymore. They were calculating, careful, and afraid, not of what they'd done, but of what I hadn't done yet. The next morning, Jamie avoided my eyes. Natalie made pancakes. She'd never made pancakes on a weekday in 10 years of marriage. Not once. When I bit into one, it tasted like an apology. And I didn't need it. Because I had already stopped being the man she was sorry to. I was becoming someone else. Someone watching from the quiet corner. And preparing to move. I bought the recorder online. No flashy features, no voice-activated settings. Just a simple, silent device that could run for hours and disappear into the folds of our everyday life. It arrived in a plain envelope. No return address. No brand name. Just plastic, metal, and purpose. I hid it behind the books on the living room shelf, near the armchair they both gravitated toward most evenings. Natalie liked to call that corner our little quiet spot. The irony wasn't lost on me. If she only knew. The first night I planted it, nothing happened. Just the sound of forks clinking over plates, the hum of a documentary playing in the background, Eli asking for water, the shuffle of socks on wood. I listened to the file alone in my car the next morning, parked 2 streets over. Nothing. But I let it run again the next night. And the next. By the 4th day, I caught something. Jamie, he's home late again. Natalie, lately, he always is. Jamie, do you think he's avoiding us? Natalie, a pause, maybe. Or maybe he's finally comfortable not pretending. Jamie, you say that like you're sad. Natalie, I'm not sad. I'm tired. Jamie, tired enough to be done? A beat of silence. Natalie, I'd be done if it were just me. Another pause. A creak, someone shifting on the couch. Natalie again, but it's not just me, is it? There's Eli. And everything we built. And there's the guilt. Jamie, you're not the villain. Natalie, soft laugh, aren't I? That was the first moment I had to pause the recording. Not because it hurt, but because it didn't. Because in that moment, I realized something terrifying. She didn't even sound conflicted. She sounded rehearsed. Like someone who'd had the same inner dialogue for weeks, maybe months. She'd already said these things to herself. Maybe even to him. But never to me. I let the audio continue. Jamie, he doesn't really see you anymore. Natalie, I don't think he's looked at me, really looked, since before Eli was born. Jamie, so look at me. Then silence. Not the kind of silence where nothing happens. The kind where everything does, but no one names it. I heard a breath. I heard her say, don't, not now. And then. I would have left already, if it weren't for Eli. That line stayed with me longer than anything else. I sat in the car for nearly an hour, listening to the same phrase on loop. Not because I needed confirmation of betrayal. I already had that. What I was hearing now was justification. Reason. Emotion wrapped in logic. She wasn't cheating in secret anymore. She was justifying a decision she hadn't made yet, because she wanted to do it on her terms. It was no longer about fear. It was about timing. I started watching her differently after that. Not looking for guilt, looking for calculation. I saw it in how she packed Jamie's lunch without asking. In how she left notes for him on the fridge, subtle and neutral, like don't forget protein and good luck at the gym. But the handwriting was rounded, softer than usual, the way it used to be when she left notes for me. One evening, Eli sat with Jamie at the kitchen table, watching him work on some online course. Jamie explained things gently, like an older brother or a father. Natalie leaned on the counter, watching them, smiling. I came in. The smile disappeared before she turned. Hey, she said. Didn't hear you come in. You looked busy, I said. She brushed past me with a half-smile. Just tutoring. He's helping Eli with his reading. Eli looked up. Jamie knows all the best stories. Mom says he reads like a movie. I nodded. That's so. Jamie smiled at me. Easy and steady. He's a good listener. I bet. Later that night, Natalie came into the guest room where I still slept. Matt, she said quietly, can we talk this weekend? About what? I just feel like we've been coexisting, and I don't want that to be our whole life. I looked at her for a long moment. Is that how it feels, like coexisting? She hesitated. Sometimes. I nodded. All right. We'll talk this weekend. She didn't know that I'd already made my decision. The recorder was no longer for evidence. It was for understanding. And now that I understood, I could begin planning. Not how to win her back, but how to disappear in a way she'd never forget. The email came in midweek. A friendly note from the local coordinator of the student exchange program, a small farewell gathering in Jamie's honor, hosted at our place, since he always spoke so fondly of his host family. I forwarded it to Natalie. Her reply was instant. Let's do it. It'll be special. I didn't respond. That night, she came into the guest room again, knocked softly, leaned against the doorframe. You saw the email? She asked. I nodded. He'll be leaving soon, she said quietly, her eyes not quite meeting mine. I think this is a good way to thank him. For what? She hesitated, then smiled thinly. For being helpful. And for being a part of Eli's life, even briefly. It was always about Eli, when she needed justification. About support, about community. She used those words like padding, soft enough to land on, but never solid enough to stand on. I told her to go ahead and plan it. I even offered to help, menu suggestions, seating arrangements. She accepted with visible relief. She thought this was a sign of forgiveness. What it really was control. Over the next few days, I made no moves. I smiled more, came home earlier, complimented her cooking. I watched them both relax, as if the crisis they had imagined was now drifting away. I had copied everything I needed onto a slim black flash drive. Audio clips, purchase records, gym confirmation emails, even a filtered transcript of the conversation behind the kitchen wall. I labeled the folder for Natalie. On the morning of the dinner, I wrapped the drive in a small white box. Natalie assumed it was for Jamie. She placed it beside the other gifts with a proud nod, her hand brushing mine, quick, instinctive, almost sincere. By 6, the guests started arriving, staff from the exchange office, our neighbors, 2 other host families. Eli ran between people, thrilled by the attention. Jamie wore a crisp button-down and smiled like someone who'd already written the closing paragraph of his own chapter. Natalie floated through the evening with practiced ease, pouring wine, lighting candles, telling anecdotes like someone trying to prove just how normal everything was. I stayed in the background, calm, polite. Dinner was served. Glasses clinked. Toasts were made. Then Jamie stood. I just want to say, he began, this experience has meant the world to me. Not just because of the program, but because of this house, this family. Matt, Natalie. Eli, thank you. You gave me more than I ever expected. The guests clapped. Natalie smiled, eyes glistening. And then I stood. Jamie, I said, before you open your gifts, I want to say something too. The room quieted. I stepped forward, lifted the small white box, and placed it gently in front of Natalie. This one's for you, I said. She blinked. Me. I nodded. It's everything you've built over the past few months. Every decision, every conversation, every transaction. She didn't touch it. Guests glanced at each other. Natalie's not just a great host, I continued, she's a great planner. Every detail of this evening was flawless. Just like the ones you didn't see. She stood frozen, her smile faltering but still attached to her face like a mask not yet removed. You always told me truth is contextual, I said, still smiling. I've just collected the context. Jamie's eyes shifted between us. He understood before she did. And for the first time, I saw panic in his expression. Natalie opened her mouth to speak, but said nothing. Because deep down, she knew this wasn't a speech. It was the beginning of silence. After dessert, Natalie tapped her glass. Before we wrap up, she said with a glowing smile, I'd like to thank everyone for coming. Jamie's time here has been unforgettable, and we're honored to have shared our home with him. Polite applause. Laughter. Jamie looked humbled, grateful. It was almost sweet, almost convincing. Then she turned to me. Matt, she offered. Do you want to say a few words? I stood up. Not quickly. Not dramatically. Just enough to make the room settle. Actually, I said. Yes, I do. But before I began, I glanced at Rachel. My sister Rachel had been visiting us for the weekend, helping out with Eli and staying in the guest room upstairs. She was quiet by nature, but sharp, the kind of person who didn't miss much. I trusted her more than anyone. She nodded immediately. Eli, she said gently, let's go upstairs and get your pajamas on, okay? I'll read you something while the grown-ups finish talking. He hopped off his chair. Can we build the spaceship after? Absolutely. They left. The door clicked shut behind them, and the air changed. I turned to the room, Let my gaze settle on each person for a moment before speaking. I've been asked to make a toast, I said. So here's to clarity. People chuckled politely. They didn't know what was coming. Jamie's time with us has, indeed, been unforgettable. But probably not for the reasons you think. I walked to the TV stand, picked up a slim black remote, and turned on the screen. I wasn't planning on saying anything tonight, but I realized silence has protected the wrong people for too long. I clicked play. From the speakers came Natalie's voice, soft and unguarded. I'd be done if it were just me. Then Jamie. Would that be so bad? Natalie again. Yes, because then I'd have to admit what this is. The room froze. I let the silence stretch, then paused the audio. This isn't fiction. It's part of a recording I captured 2 weeks ago, I continued. The equipment is basic. A recorder hidden behind the bookshelf. You know, the one where you two like to sit after dinner. Natalie's eyes widened, but she didn't speak. I raised a printed transcript in one hand. I also have bank statements showing multiple purchases charged to our joint account, all related to Jamie. A $127 gym membership, a custom-fit running shoe order under my name, grooming expenses, Uber rides from our home during work hours while I was away. I flipped to another page. Here's the invoice for a weekend stay at a boutique hotel. Booked with my email. Confirmed under her name. Paid with my card. Gasps rippled through the room. The coordinator from the exchange program stood slightly. Wait, this is very serious. It is, I said, facing her directly. Especially considering Jamie was listed as a dependent under my name, forged through HR documentation my wife accessed using her company privileges. I've submitted the evidence to your office already. You'll find digital logs, timestamps, and security key codes. Jamie's face had gone pale. This is insane, he muttered. You're twisting everything. I turned to him. Jamie, shall I play the part where you said, he doesn't really see you anymore? Or when you said, maybe that's worse. He looked at Natalie. You told me he wouldn't find out. She still didn't move. Her hands were flat on the table, knuckles white. I turned back to the group. I spent months being replaced under my own roof. My space, my name, my family, all used as raw material for someone else's affair. One neighbor shifted uncomfortably. Another lowered her gaze. You watched us, all of you, I said. And maybe it seemed idyllic, but you didn't see the lies woven into the pattern. I let that sit, then pointed to the screen. Everything you need to know is there. I don't need to explain further. Jamie stood abruptly. I'm done here. Good, I said. So am I. He started toward the door. You might want to wait, I added. There's a clause in your visa paperwork. False documentation from a host family invalidates your program status. Your agency should be calling soon. He stopped mid-step. Natalie finally spoke. A whisper. Matt, please. But I looked past her. This wasn't to embarrass you, I said. It was to expose the truth. I'm done pretending. I turned toward the hall. Behind me, silence. No defense. No applause. Only the sound of something finally breaking, not loud, not violent. Just final. I didn't go back into the dining room. I heard no footsteps behind me. No one followed. Rachel met me at the foot of the stairs, Eli already in his coat, holding his little duffel bag. Do you need help with anything? She asked softly. No, I said. Just him. She placed a hand on my arm. You were calm. Too calm. That was the point. I stepped into the hallway and saw Jamie standing by the door, phone in hand, backpack slung low over his shoulder. His mouth opened when he saw me, maybe to apologize, maybe to beg, maybe to explain what could no longer be explained. Behind him, through the open door, 2 men in dark jackets walked up the front path. One of them held a clipboard. Exchange program officials. Timing mattered. I didn't nod to Jamie. I didn't speak to him. He looked at me with something between panic and humiliation, as if now, for the first time, he truly understood whose house this had always been. Natalie stepped into view from the dining room, arms wrapped around herself. Please, she whispered. Don't take Eli away from me. I didn't argue. I didn't defend. I'm taking him away from this, I said. You can't just erase. I'm not erasing anything. I'm leaving it here. All of it. I handed her an envelope. Thick, unsealed. Inside, my removal from joint accounts. Legal separation notice. Documented statement of collected evidence. One sentence, handwritten at the bottom. You broke it. You live in it. She looked down. Didn't open it. I leaned toward Eli, fixed his scarf, tucked in his collar. He looked up at me, curious but trusting. innocent. We stepped out into the night. The air was cold, but clear. As we walked down the path, I didn't turn to see if she stood there watching. I didn't need to. Her silence behind me was louder than any scream. At the curb, Rachel's car waited. I helped Eli into the back seat. He asked, "Are we coming back tomorrow?" I met his eyes in the rearview mirror. "No," I said. "We're going somewhere better." He nodded, quiet. As we pulled away, I saw Jamie still on the porch, talking rapidly to the officials. Natalie stood behind the door, small, still. And the house, once mine, was now nothing but a shell with soft lighting and no voice. I had nothing left to say. And that was the sharpest sentence of all.